This reminds me of an autumn afternoon in Agra. Is it Agra? You know, over there by the Taj Mahal. What do we got here? Who could forget that little restaurant there by the canal in Shanghai? I can't remember the name, but I'll never forget it. Allspice in my chicken. Always takes me back to Jamaica. Yeah. Have I actually been to these places? Nope. But I feel like I have because of spices. No other power on Earth has the ability to transport us through space and time like the mysterious mojo of spices. All of the world's great cuisines are defined by spices. Heck, even the world we live on is defined by spice, or was. I mean, Christopher Columbus, Vasco da Gama, and Ferdinand Magellan weren't looking for space to build new condos. They were searching for spices. So join us, won't you, as we do a little bit of exploring ourselves into the dark, mysterious, complex, sensual, non-caloric world that is spices, which are most definitely The first step in learning how to cook with spices is learning where to find spices. Now, here in America, we do have some indigenous spices, allspice, vanilla, chili peppers, all from here. But by and large, most of your culinary spices come from the other side of the planet. And in their journey from there to here, a lot of things can happen. Not all of them good. And they pass through a lot of hands, and all those palms, you know, want to be greased a little bit. Quality can go down. So if you're going to be a world-class spice cooker, you really should try to find yourself a world-class spice merchant. Like this one in Seattle, Washington. You know, I'm really sorry we haven't worked out that scratch and sniff TV yet. These are all spices. Now, what's the difference between a spice and an herb? I'm glad you asked. Both herbs and spices contain volatile, essential, flavorful oils. Now, if those oils are expressed in the leaves of the plant, then it's an herb. Okay, basil, tarragon, dill, all herbs. If those oils, however, appear in other botanical parts, then we're talking about spices. For instance, okay, let's see here. Perfect. Up here on the top floor, we have some examples of seeds. Mustard seeds brown, mustard seeds yellow, poppy seeds, you remember those, right? Poppies. Never mind. Fenugreek, white sesame seeds, black sesame seeds, and coriander, one of my favorite spices. Interesting because when planted in the ground, it generates an herb we call cilantro. Thank you, thing. Which oddly enough doesn't taste anything like coriander at all. Now, down one level, we have some berries. Now, white, black, and green peppercorns all come from the same plant, Piper nigrum. Then we've got juniper berries, allspice berries, and pink peppercorns, which are all the way down here because they're not really peppercorns at all. They're just little pink berries that kind of look like pepper. Down one more level, and we've got three very interesting seeds. Fennel seeds, cumin seeds, caraway seeds. Why are they interesting? They're not really seeds. They're little bitty fruits, dried fruits. Then we've got a couple of barks. True cinnamon and its imitator, cassia. Most of the cinnamon that we eat in this country is actually cassia. And two ground rhizomes, turmeric and ginger. You almost never see these in their whole form because, well, let's face it, it's hard to grind something like this at home. Okay, moving down to the bottom level, we have the pods. Here we have white cardamom and green cardamom and the stuff that is inside those pods. You can buy it like this. I kind of like it in the full pod. Cloves, star anise, and what is probably the most famous pod of all time, vanilla. You know, most herbs can be used in either their dry or fresh state, but not so with spices. For instance, this vanilla in its green form looks kind of like a green bean. It has no flavor or aroma whatsoever. But via the enzymatic changes that come with drying, this becomes one of the most flavorful items on earth. Plus kind of a nice Salvador Dali, you know. Costume.
Can I help you?
Busted, like Benjamin Bunny. When it comes to spice storage, our goal is to keep the volatile oils inside the spices for as long as possible. That means keeping them away from light, air, moisture, and heat. pretty much the same stuff that you'd want to protect your coffee beans from. And like coffee beans, I like to keep my spices in tins. Now, some spice houses already package their goods in tin, but you can pick these up at the hardware store, at a craft store, for about $1 a pop. Oh, just make sure that when you label them that you put the date on the inside so that you'll know when to upgrade. I figure 2 years for whole spices and 6 months for ground. Now, as for keeping up with these, just stop by your friendly neighborhood hardware store and pick up a roll of Velcro tape. That way you can convert the inside of any cabinet into an instant spice rack. Pretty cool, huh? Now, there are essentially 2 ways to deal with spices, whole and ground. In the case of whole, the goal is to use heat and a solvent to extract flavor from the spices, which you'll then fish out and dispose of later. Fruit compote is an excellent example of this kind of dish. And I especially like this version because you don't need much fresh fruit. What you'll need is 4 ounces of dried figs, 4 ounces of dried pears, 2 tablespoons of orange blossom or some other honey, 1/2 of a vanilla bean. And from the refrigerator, a cup of apple cider, 1/2 cup of white wine, and 1-inch long strip of lemon peel, plus about a tablespoon of freshly squeezed lemon juice. Then the spices, 6 whole cloves, 1 cinnamon stick, 1 star anise pod, and 1/2 teaspoon kosher salt. Bring all the ingredients to a simmer in a medium saucepan over medium heat. Then reduce the heat to low and simmer for another 1 to 1.5 hours. Then remove the cloves, cinnamon stick, and star anise and serve warm or refrigerate and serve over ice cream. Yum. When it comes time to grind your spices, you've got plenty of technology to choose from. At the bottom of the evolutionary scale, the mortar and pestle. Popular since low foreheads were all the rage. Although they're still popular with purists today. The real trick in buying one is to pick the right material. Here we have marble. Very pretty, if not a little on the weighty side, and very, very popular. The problem is that they're usually really smooth on the inside, so it's tough to get a grip on the spices. It takes too long. Better is metal, cast iron. Nice little texture in there. You can do some serious grinding. But the truth is iron can kind of corrode on you if you're not being careful. And this thing weighs like 8 pounds. Nope, for me, I'll stick with a good old-fashioned ceramic apothecary style mortar and pestle. Looks smooth, I know. But truth is there's enough texture in there to really grab hold of whatever you're grinding. This is a 6-incher, which I think is the right size for just about any job. What'll it grind? Just about anything. The problem is that even a good mortar and pestle takes a little bit of time to use. See what I mean? Pepper mills or pepper grinders can be used to grind most spices, as long as the individual pieces of those spices are roughly the size and shape of peppercorns, which is a lot of spices, but not all spices. Now, my very favorite hand grinding contraption is right here. This grinder features an easy-to-fill jar. Just insert the spices of your choice. Ooh, cinnamon. Clamp on the lid. Set the size of the grind up here on top and get busy. Now, since the grinding apparatus is unglazed porcelain, just like our mortar and pestle, it grabs and holds spices much better than either steel or plastic. Sweet. Oh, there is one more choice. Walk into the kitchen of any American restaurant that doesn't have a drive-through window attached to it, and you will see one of these. That's right, a coffee grinder, but not for grinding coffee. Nope, there they use them for grinding spices because this little baby will turn even a couple of tough sticks of cinnamon into dust in moments. The secret to buying one of these is to look for a model with a deep metal cup. You want all metal because plastic soaks up flavors and will distribute them to things like your coffee. If you have one like this, you can use it for your coffee. If you don't, you're going to need to get a couple more of these. Anyway, since this works so quickly, I suggest you work in rapid pulses. There we have about 1.5 teaspoons of amazingly Aromatic cinnamon. Now, doesn't that just beat the pants off of what would come in one of these containers, pre-ground and smelling and tasting of absolute nothing? Don't even know why I have this. It's horrible. This is nice. Most of the spices that are consumed on this planet are consumed along with other spices. And there's a really good reason for that. You see, all by itself, a single spice tastes rather unidimensional, rather, well, nice but monotonous. However, if you use several spices together that share a similar chemical structure, they support each other, so you get something more like a harmony. It works together. The real key, of course, is to not use spices together that give you something more like... Everybody's a music critic. You know, luckily, millions of years of culinary evolution have worked out some classic combinations. Things like chili powder, five-spice powder, garam masala, and my personal favorite, curry powder. Oh, bother. You know, no cooks on earth handle spices better than the cooks that call the Indian subcontinent home. This may be because India sits slap dab in the middle of Spice Central. For those of you who aren't familiar with Indian cuisine, you have to realize that the word curry in India is kind of like the word chili is in the United States. It's a mixture of spices, but it's also a way of cooking or a dish that has about, 6 million different permutations. But all curries are united by the fact that they depend on a complex mixture of spices. Now, here in America, meat curries are really popular, but personally, I like a simple, easy-to-make vegetable curry. First step is to clean, peel, and dice all these vegetables. You're right, that doesn't sound very simple, does it? You know what I like better? Walking over to the freezer, reaching in, pulling out a 1-pound bag of frozen veg med. Now all you have to do is find yourself a skewer and poke a few holes in the bag, chuck it in the microwave, and hit 2 minutes on high. Do I have a problem with using frozen vegetables? No. Most curries start with a big old heavy pan over medium-high heat, and this one is no exception. We have here a 10-inch skillet. Nothing less will do. Once it's hot, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil and swirl to coat. Then toss in 1 teaspoon of cumin seeds, 1/2 teaspoon of yellow mustard seeds, and 1/2 teaspoon of fennel seeds. There. Add on your trusty splatter shield, okay? Because when the seeds start popping, they'll pop out all over the kitchen if you're not careful. While that gets hot, we will contemplate 2/3 of a cup of yogurt. And into that, we will whisk 1 teaspoon of cornstarch. Okay? Now, this is going to be our sauce base, but we're going to keep it in the bowl because if we were to add it to the hot pot, the yogurt would curdle, and that wouldn't be a very good thing. Ooh, seeds are popping. Carefully add to this 1/2 teaspoon of freshly ground coriander, 1/2 teaspoon of onion powder. Can't fix that one yourself. 1/8 of a teaspoon of freshly ground cinnamon, and a teaspoon of ground turmeric. That's another one you can't really grind yourself. There. Now to that, we're going to add 2 cloves of garlic, lightly crushed, and 3 dried red chilies. Now, I like to take off the stems and get the seeds out of there so it won't be too hot. There. And we're just going to let this cook until the garlic starts to turn gold. Ah, the vegetables. Now, I just let these cook until they're thawed. I don't really want them to be soft. 2 minutes usually does the trick. If your microwave's a little slower, it might take 3. So just cut these straight into the pan. There. And to that, I'm going to add 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt, 1/4 teaspoon of sugar, and a few grinds of black pepper. There. Now just toss to combine. Now, as soon as you are confident that the vegetables are hot, and they are, move this straight over to the yogurt and just stir them in. Faster the better. There, the sauce will come together right away. Now, if you want, you can serve this with the chilies still in there, or you can pick them out. You don't want people to eat them, that's for sure. I predict that in the not-so-distant future, every person on Earth is going to have their own TV network and their own spice rub. See, the problem with commercial spice rubs is that they contain mostly salt. I mean, every one of these containers has salt as the leading ingredient. Why do that? Well, salt takes up a lot of space, it's cheap, and it lasts forever. The problem is if you like your food really spicy, and I sometimes do, you shake on more of this stuff, and that means you're just adding more and more salt to your food. Now, the way I see it is that seasoning or salting food should be done completely separately from spicing it. They're two completely different activities. Now, let's just say for a second we had a big old slab of salmon. Well, would you look at that? Personally, I like my salmon broiled, and that poses some specific challenges when it comes to spicing. So, broil, and make sure my rack is in the top third of the oven. And, of course, we can't broil on a wooden plank. Well, we could, but that's another show. Now, since water-soluble proteins are going to seep out onto this pan and create a glue, I'm going to give this a quick brush with a little bit of canola oil to keep the fish from sticking. There. And now for the transfer, flip, and deliver. Now, if the tail hangs off of your pan, just tuck it under a little bit or scrunch it up. That'll make things a little even. There. Oh, excuse me a sec. Gotta get rid of those fishy hands, don't you know? Okay, salt is our primary seasoning, and that is what goes down first. And I'm going to use a good heavy teaspoon to teaspoon and a half. There's a lot of fish here. Just sprinkle it down, and make sure you get a little more in the middle where the meat is thicker, and a little less along the tail. That'll do. And then pepper. I like a coarse grind pepper, and this is going to take just a little bit of time. This handle's a little... Excuse me a moment, won't you? And now on to the rest of the salmon spices. Load into your blender 2 teaspoons of onion powder, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1/2 teaspoon of cayenne pepper, 1 teaspoon of whole cumin seeds, 1 tablespoon of whole fennel seeds, 1 tablespoon whole coriander seeds, and 1 Lone Star anise pod. Clamp on the lid nice and tight and hit the highest speed you've got. Why do this in a blender instead of our grinder? Back in the 15th century, French perfume makers learned that they could extract the essential oils from flowers by soaking them in cold fat. The result was called pomade. And basically what we're going to do is make a culinary version of pomade by soaking these spices in canola oil. About 1/3 of a cup will do the trick. Now, if you can possibly manage the time, when you get this all brushed on, let this sit for about ½ an hour at room temperature. Yes, it'll be fine. Spices have antiseptic properties. Remember, they've been used in preserving since, I don't know, mammoths roamed Montana. It'll be fine. Slide your side under your broiler and try to twist the pan a little bit so that it lines up with the broiler array. There. Now, set your timer for 15 minutes. I'm not saying it's going to be done in 15 minutes. I'm just saying we're going to check on it in 15 minutes. Looks good and not a burned spice in sight. Of course, there's only 3 ways to tell if it is really done. First, we can feel. It's firm, but bounces back all the way. Good sign. We could try the flaky test. Just kind of pierce into it and take a look. If the fibers separate, but it's still pink down inside, we're good to go. Last but not least, of course, we can take its temperature. We'll be looking for about 131 degrees in the deepest part of the meat, which we have. We'll just let carryover take it the rest of the way. I sure hope we've inspired you to set up a little spice trade of your own. Just remember, purchase whole spices whenever you can from a reliable purveyor, internet or mail order are fine, and store those spices in a cool, dry, dark, airtight place. And don't keep them around too long, 2 years tops for whole spices and no more than 6 months for ground. When cooking with spices, remember to introduce them to the party. Get them into the cooking as early as possible so the flavors will have time to bloom and melt. And remember, fats are the best carriers of spice flavor. Oh, I almost forgot. If you want to dabble around with your own homemade spice concoctions, and you should, do what the pros do and use a combination of ground and whole spices. Here's my own personal curry mix. 2 tablespoons of cumin seed, 2 tablespoons of cardamom seed, 2 tablespoons of coriander seeds, all tossed with a 1/4 cup of ground turmeric, a tablespoon of dried mustard, and a teaspoon of cayenne. With this on hand, I can grind and cook whenever I want without having to bother around with all that messy blending. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to blend into some of this fish. See you next time on Good Eats.